Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome, jewelers. Welcome, crypto people. Welcome all, baby. We are back. It's Mega THEAT Trade. We're coming at you with a new show here. We're going to be talking a lot of Bitcoin. This is Orange Energy, weekly Thursdays, and we are going to be talking a lot of broad crypto market and all. Just to intro for anyone who is new to this channel, my name's Mega. Been in the crypto scene for about, at this point, 5 years now? No, a little under 5 years. So, not even basically coming upon a full cycle, depending on how this one really shapes out. But it's been crazy. And, as the boys say here, I've been orange pilled hardcore. So that's the idea, premise behind this show here. We're going to be talking a lot of Bitcoin. Of course, we're all shitcoining, altcoining for the most part. At least I know I am a little bit on the side. But it's going to be a lot of focus on Bitcoin and what that causes for the broader market, why I'm orange pilled. And these two might push back on me a little bit here and there, but it's going to be fun. We'll start with we'll start with THEAT right under me. Firstly, how long have you been in crypto, brother? And just give a little bit about yourself here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mega. Yeah, I go by THEAT. If you have not seen any of our other content on the Jewelers channel, excited to be kicking this off. The orange pill, a little orange energy. Exciting. I am a big Bitcoin guy. We'll get into it in a bit. I've been in the crypto scene about the same length of time, 5 years or so. Wish it was longer. I've known about Bitcoin for a long time. Used to make jokes about mining it back on my PlayStation 3, and I wish I would have, bro, because I'd be in a different place, but that's all right. That's all right.
That's amazing to hear. There's always a little bit of if I just would have bought it the first time, or aped in the first time that I heard of it. But
Yeah.
you have to live, you have to learn. Trade, same question goes to you, brother. You've been with us for a while. How long have you been in crypto? And a little background on yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in the trade room. Been in crypto, man, going on 10, maybe 11 years now. So
Damn.
been through a few cycles, and lost a lot of money in the early days. So decided to combine not only the fundamentals of what's going on in the markets and the tokens and the tokenomics, but also too went into the charting portion of things and understanding economics and politics and how all that plays in to try to be a guide for myself. And so really excited for this Bitcoin show, this overall broader conversation that we have, because even when it comes to the charts, I use Bitcoin as my number one leading indicator when it comes to crypto. And I use the S&P 500 as my number one leading indicator when it comes to the stock market. And the combination of those two will tell you everything that's going on in the global capital market. So excited to be here.
Those two really do seem to be the leading indicators of, all financials truly within these markets. And we're going to go over it. We're going to talk at the beginning here. We're going to give a little bit of it's been a while since we've been live. Of course, like THEAT was mentioning, we stream a lot of GameFi, gaming crypto. And that's kind of where our content journey began. And but now we're diving into the broader market here, because we've always had it as a backbone. Like you said, Trade, you've always used it as your leading indicator, even when we're talking crypto gaming, DeFi Kingdoms, Spellborn, these other games we've played. So for us to maneuver and talk about the broader market and how it truly affects everything, that's what I kind of want to focus on here. Bitcoin is the true beginning of what we're doing on the blockchain, whether it be shit coins on the Solana, meme coin, pump fund, whatever you're doing over there, whether it be real world assets, real world applications in, the government and stuff like that, that's coming upon us fairly fast. It seems like people say, when is retail going to get here? Well, institutions are here pretty fast, faster than I expected, at least. And it's driving things to a level where we could see very crazy exponential gains. And, just to give a little bit of background as well for myself, at least, because I think it's crucial and relevant to the conversation. I said earlier that I've only been in crypto for 4 years. I've heard of Bitcoin since, 2016, but that first time you hear about it, you wave it off so fast, you know what I mean? Because it's just like, oh, you see this back then, might not have been $100,000 a coin, which we're going to get into here. 118 plus $1,000 a coin. But back then, $1,000 or so, you're like, I missed it. When you're keen in the stock market, and you're like, these stocks move normally, quote unquote. You know what I mean? They're not moving like some of these crypto projects or Bitcoin did in the early days. Now, those gains are probably, unfortunately, those exponential, crazy, $1,000, $100 to where we are today. Of course, probably not going to happen, but we're going to talk about the inevitability. We're going to talk about why I at least feel I've been one of the reasons I've been orange pilled, and why, it does feel almost inevitable to me for some of these price targets as we go on throughout the years. But Trade, without further ado, do you want to kick off here, give the people an idea of where Bitcoin lies currently, pricing, talk a little bit of other assets as well, maybe a few of these top 10 in the space here. I got a chart I want to pull up as well. So if you want to pop that up, we'll jump in there, and yeah, let's kick it off.
Yeah, for sure. So, for anyone who is jumping into crypto for the first time, maybe even investing for the first time, the question is, why should I care about Bitcoin? Why should I care, about crypto? Why should I care about investing? And, it's been a long told tale of, whatever you're earning, how to just try to make more money, right? Try to have your money work for you. And if you are somebody who's interested in having your money work for you, then one of the first things you look at is the stock market. Eventually you dig in long enough, you realize the stock market has made a lot of millionaires, have changed people's lives, have allowed people to better their family generation after generation. And that's been here over 200 years. And then you realize, oh, there's other markets out there, right? There's precious mineral markets like gold, which throughout the lifetime of this channel, we're going to talk about a lot in comparison to Bitcoin. There's, the Forex markets, there's the energy markets, and then you have the cryptocurrency markets, which are based, on blockchain and a lot of fintech. And so that leads you to Bitcoin at the end of the day. And you learn that Bitcoin was the first, and Bitcoin was the proof of concept. But for me, the reason why I care about this space and the reason why I focus on it so much is because, I'm from Africa and really didn't from a good family, but we didn't have other means of saying this is how we're gonna make our income. And the difference between, let's say, Bitcoin and other investments is it is global. So whether you're in the US, whether you're in Africa, whether you're in China, you have the ability to enter into these markets, opposed to you need a US citizenship in order to enter into the stock market and things of that nature. And so it provides a way for the entire world to touch this ecosystem. It provides a way for you to make your money work for you. And it provides a way for you to change your life or your family's life. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is the technology that comes with not only Bitcoin, but the entire cryptocurrency space. And so crypto's been here for 16, now going plus years. And the time that we are in is very critical. And you would ask, why that's the case. And that's the case because the US government, which is the number one capital markets in the world, has gone from rejecting this ecosystem to embracing, this ecosystem. So Mega, you mentioned, oh yeah, everybody's heard about Bitcoin, in the past. We may not have known that it's 21 million coins available, and there's not enough. I think what's the metric? If every human decided to buy one Bitcoin, or like some metric where there's not enough for everybody, right? That's the legacy of Bitcoin that's been been thrown out there. But the reason why I bring up what you said earlier is because if you have heard about it in the past, the rhetoric was that, oh, it's scammers that use it. It's used for illicit activities. It's a drug dealer's best friend. And you have to ask yourself why these rhetoric was put out about Bitcoin. And it tends to be that when the government or countries don't understand a technology, they will throw shade or throw negative context on a technology or a new up and coming thing. So just wanted to give that intro as to why I am in the space and why I find being in this space important. And then we can dig into further why the US, the number one capital markets in the world, has decided to now bring in laws to bring guidance to this ecosystem. And we can talk about more about some of the tokenomics. But for you guys, what are your whys? Why do you care about this stuff? Why are you here?
Yeah, T, you want to kick it off on that one?
Yeah, man, I'll jump in here a little bit. So, it's funny for me because growing up, my dad, he was a finance major in college, worked at banks my whole life. So from like the moment I had my first job, it was save, save, save. He literally was asking me like, "Can you get into the 401k?" Whenever I was a busboy, for my very first job, I was like, "Dad, I'm 16. I work 10 hours a week. I don't think I'm gonna get a 401k." So for me, man, I've always just kind of had that beaten into me, the investing part. And for my dad, that's always been the traditional stock market. He'll preach just consistently buying into the index funds, S&P 500, and just holding for years on end, and watching that compounding factor grow, and seeing your money, 20 years from now, having million, 2 million, dollars just by buying into the stock market. He's always preaching that to me. So I was into stocks for a while, and eventually that led into kind of more of the crypto based stuff. I was always into the tech stocks. I've done fairly well for myself investing in tech stocks, and that kind of led to natural curiosity around crypto because of the technology, and then also the potential profits, of course. So I got in, and I've taken some lumps on some questionable investments, if you will, but I've also done quite well for myself on some more solid investments like Bitcoin. And one thing, I do hold Bitcoin in a lot of different forms and fashions. Trade. It was interesting to hear you bring up the fact that it's international. Everyone could have access to it. And that's something that I do love about the technology, and that's great about it. And I do hold some of my Bitcoin holding on chain, hardware wallets, that kind of thing. But
A
then
question to jump in here on you, T, because I know you're taking
Yeah.
a trip internationally here. You're
Yeah.
a Bitcoin holder. Do you utilize it as a payment source when international? Not as much?
Man, no, but Bitcoin for me is a long-term hold, man.
You're
So
holding. No, that's what I like to hear. But
yeah.
do
So
you
I'm
see
not,
opportunities to use it when
for
international?
me, I'm not trying to give away too much of my game, to be honest with you. But for me, I'm just trying to stack up as much as I can, and especially and squirreling away in those hardware wallets. Just for me, that's kind of like maybe in 15 years or something, I could see myself spending some of that, transacting with it. But right now, it's just still accumulation mode for me. So, and to kind of finish up that thought, the way that I've accumulated most of my holdings, which we'll, I'm sure, get into this at some point in more detail, but the institutional expansion that we've seen, being able to hold ETFs that are representative of Bitcoin, that the whatever institution is running that ETF, they're buying the Bitcoin on your behalf, has been great for me, because I've been able to build out a pretty solid position in retirement accounts, man. So tax advantaged, we can get into that at some point too. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do now, and we've seen really a lot of quickly ramping up of the institutional investors in this space. So it's exciting for sure.
Yeah,
Great time.
Very
for
exciting.
sure. That's going to be a perfect segue, into the Genius Act. But yeah, Mega, why don't you tell us, since you've been orange pill recently, what's your why?
Yeah, for sure. So, my why, when you begin crypto, my, of course, intro as well was the stock market, was, finding those avenues to increase, your net worth fast. I love the stock market, but it did feel slow. And you do find these opportunities initially, especially for me, because my entry into the crypto markets was a bull market. And I don't know how common that is amongst people,
Very.
but you see those gains and you're like, what is going on over here? For me, I didn't have much knowledge of it beforehand, but you quickly kind of gain that understanding of the blockchain. For me, it's ass backwards though. I jumped onto protocols to learn the blockchain afterwards. You know what I mean? I was doing things on the blockchain. I wanted to do things on the blockchain without understanding the blockchain fully. So for me, it was kind of ass backwards. But over time, you see, for me at least, you see what it truly is, in my opinion. Is there's one greatest asset ever as far as digital assets, and that's going to be Bitcoin forever because of a few factors. For me, it's the limited nature, only 21 million. There's only ever going to be 21 million. We talk, both of you guys, of international trade, of instantaneous, give me your address and I'm sending you Bitcoin this second, within less than a minute, overseas, anywhere across the globe. And then the biggest one that really flipped me this year is just the utter bullshit that the government has done with our United States dollar, truly. The fiscal printing, the irresponsibility and this isn't this. We're not going to try to avoid getting political, because we never do on these shows, but it does tie in. We will talk politics without trying to get one sided or not. But for me, what I've realized is that both sides are irresponsible as fuck. We currently have a two-side system. We do have, which is great news. I don't know. I don't support it because I don't know their full, mission, if you will. But we do have Elon Musk pushing for the America Party, which is a supporter of Bitcoin already, which is interesting. I still don't think, the way they have the system set up, I don't think a third party can come in and actually successfully dethrone one or the other two. So we're in this constant cycle of these two parties fucking us back and forth by printing the dollar on our heads. And, there's this one visual I remember vividly when I was a kid and I was working one of my first jobs, of prices from the 70s and then the 80s and then the 90s and then the 2000s. I think it also had the 60s in there. And you just see the way before and after we fucked ourselves on the switching the dollar to the gold standard, off of the gold standard rather. They just realized, I believe, shortly after that, they could just irresponsibly print the fuck out of the dollar, and they have no repercussions, truly. So I truly think, and I love to give any pushback on any of this too, as well as we go on throughout these shows through the weeks, because we should be educated on all sides of the coin. You know what I mean? I know I'm ranting here, boys, but I recently saw XRP. This is more digital or more broad market, excuse me. I recently, I've heard XRP since I've been in 2020, but I just recently heard one of the craziest things about XRP is that their ledger missed the first 32,000 blocks. You don't know these things until you dive deep into certain avenues of the market. So, but overall, that's why I'm orange pilled. I think it's the greatest asset there is. I'm still diving into altcoins. I'm still diving into even some more or less gambling tech on the chain, because those gains are there and you can't miss. If you're in the crypto scene, you can't limit yourself to those certain things. So for me, trade, that's my why. That's why I'm orange pilled here today.
Yeah, no, I can definitely hear the passion in you. And I'm an XRP guy, so we're gonna have to
yes, and that's the thing.
We're gonna have to
XRP.
We're gonna have to break down some of these quote unquote known facts about XRP, and that's kind of why I'm excited for this show and that we branch from the crypto gaming to just attacking the overall markets, because there's a reason why now that there's real infrastructure and laws being put in place that XRP is the leader in the current altcoin market. And we'll talk about that.
And full transparency, Trade, because I don't just in one ear out the other to your vocals. I do hold XRP. I just had to let that be known. I'm not a hater. I just recently heard that news and was shocked because is it true? I gotta ask Trade. But
we'll dig into that. We'll dig into that. There's a whole like history, and like I said, we have so much content that we'll cover. But yeah, you know, you go through certain stages when you get into crypto. And a big part of it is when you find out what money is. And there's a book that I'd recommend for anybody who, you know, kind of wants to understand why, you know, the U.S. is the leader as it is, why the banks are the banks. And it's called The Creature at Jekyll Island. And it talks about the Federal Reserve and how that came to be. And why the banks have such control of what we have, you know, going on. And Mega, as you continue, you know, your journey, and I was there, pissed off at the money printing, pissed off to see the devaluing, you know, of the dollar and the currency. And then you set up to a place where, you know, you realize the human gift of innovation, right? And innovation is always going to cut a blade into you know, the systems, the hierarchical systems that we have set up, and you hope that the innovation that comes does not get corrupted by those hierarchical systems. And we'll talk about more of that in the future. But, you know, to what you're saying, right? Crypto has gone from a place where it was looked at as, you know, for scammers and for drug dealers and criminals, to the point now where the current government in the U.S. has put in and signed over the Genius Act. It's moved from the Senate to the Congress to the president. And what is this Genius Act providing, right? Because when you have a asset class like the stock market, the first 16 years to 30 years was crazy. You had people doing all types of wild things, and some lost a lot of money, some became millionaires, and then the government realized what? We have to set the rules of the road. We have to put regulations in. And after 16 years, the US went from rejecting to accepting the cryptocurrency industry. And now they're doing what? Making the rules in a row. They realize the potential that this space has. And so US wants to be the leader in that space. And so now we're signing laws in. We want to protect consumers in the digital markets, right? When you have consumers that partake, you do want to set some rules in there to protect the average consumer that wants to enter. The Genius Act is a part of that. The U.S. wants to ensure that the dollar global reserve currency maintains its status. And that was a part of what the governments were saying against crypto in the early days, because they said they thought that this industry was meant to overtake the US dollar. And quite honestly, the early Bitcoiners and still some of the Bitcoin maxis nowadays, or in the past, were saying F the US dollar, F the banks. We don't, you know, we're going to bring you down. That was the general sentiment of Bitcoiners back in the day.
Now, do you think the best case scenario is for them to coincide? For all the crypto markets, not just for Bitcoin, is it best for Bitcoin and the US dollar to live in syncrecy together?
Well, this is the thing, right? Especially, this is why those who were more into altcoins back in the day, which were me, those who were into XRP and who liked where that was going, is you cannot go against governments. Okay?
Just two set in stone at this point.
You cannot go against government. You cannot tell a government F you and we're gonna take over you. You will end up in a ditch somewhere, like Gaddafi, like Bill. You'll end up in a ditch somewhere. Okay, so you have to work with governments. Okay, and that's what a lot of us altcoiners were saying about Bitcoiners was chill out, dude. Okay, there has to be a median here. And so what the government started realizing, especially the US government, is, oh, we don't have to fear that this industry is going to take the US dollar over because of stable coins. Okay. And stable coins it's become a very important thing. Before, it was only Bitcoin that was the medium of exchange to get into crypto. And now stable coins at some point in times, especially in bear markets, is starting to reach towards Bitcoin in terms of the market value, the market cap that's sitting in there. And now stable coins have also become a medium of exchange for users. And what is the stable coins denominated in? The dollar. Okay. It's not denominated in the pound or no, it's the $1. So the stable coins are always going to follow the US dollar every time there's an exchange, meaning what? It's pegged. So it's kind of like how gold was pegged to the US dollar at some point and it could be exchanged. The US government is more willing and has been incepted the matrix. The US dollar, you say, is green. So the US government has been green pilled to understand that the stable coins, as long as they're pegged to the dollar and they're exchanged in representation of the dollar can still dominate globally. And so, that was, I believe, one of the biggest things that got the US to realize, no, we can be the leaders. We can push this. And that's one of the things that Bitcoiners had to accept, that they never admit. They never admit they were saying down with the governments and all that. And now they're like, oh yeah, oh well, oh yeah, oh, Trump is going to sign this in. We're on board. Yeah, this is
a swift change in behavior from administration, both sides, because it doesn't matter. Like, seeing an administration do this and be so for it is very quick.
And I'll say this, and again, we'll talk about this later in different shows. The trauma that the XRP holders had to go through, the court cases, all of that. We fought for everybody, even though we were called the shit coiners and the bankers coins. We led the way through the courts to get us to where we are today. And I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll move on. But yes, we've seen a big change from Bitcoiners, even though they continue to talk that trash. And we gave you guys the leeway to get to where we are today. The next thing that the U.S. has done.
Okay, hang on. I'm jumping in here, bro. I'm jumping in here because I just gotta say a couple things, and you can get back at it, bro.
Sure.
I'm enjoying it, but and you're not wrong. But I do got to point out a couple things. One, there are some stable coins that are based in other currencies. Specifically the euro. There's stable coins around the euro, but the biggest ones are definitely based on the US dollar, USDC, Tether, all of that stuff. It's definitely much bigger than the others. But it is interesting too, to y'all's point, kind of taking it back to the money printing and that kind of thing. I mean, right now you're talking about Bitcoin being at all-time highs when comparing it to the US dollar, but it's not at all-time highs if you compare it to the euro, for instance, because the euro has especially, and again, not to take this into politics, but going into some of the tariff stuff that's less related to cryptocurrency, but just more so related to the overall, financial markets and Forex that you've mentioned. The dollar's down compared to other things, mostly because of tariff fears and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that is what it is. And that's another reason to be into Bitcoin, because it's resilient against all currencies, really, not just the US dollar. But at the end of the day, US dollar still is the dominant, thing that everything is based off of when it comes to financial markets. So it's still top dog. So it is most important when you're valuing things to value it against the US dollar. But it's interesting from that angle that, if you're in Europe, you're less excited about where Bitcoin is. I mean, you're still excited, but it's not quite as powerful as it is.
It's a great point, because honestly, when we were reaching these all-time highs, which for a while was around 111,000 after we reached it, kind of came back down, jumped back up after it, after some dips there. I was on Twitter hyping it up, all-time highs, baby. And then you forget that this is a global game. You got your euros coming in and they're letting us know, they're like, dude, it's not an all-time high in our currency, which just makes you think even deeper. You're
Right.
like, bro, how fucked is the US dollar? Um, and we'll get to that again. I think we're gonna have to break it down in a show and kind of give the history in a different show. Maybe that'll be a solo show when I can kind of just dive into some of the history.
Yeah,
But
there's a lot of stuff you could talk about there.
because we're gonna talk, yeah, and I think that's crucial information. Today we're just kind of jumping into things. But that's a great point, T. And I just wanted to kind of come back here to piggyback on your point. We do have, like you said, the precious metals there trade, gold, silver, topping the top 8, gold being the largest asset pool, global asset pool by market cap in the
22
world.
trillion.
Yes, 22 trillion. Of course, you have Bitcoin at number 6 right now, hovering around Google, Alphabet, and Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and Nvidia, these type of stocks, all within the 2 to 4 trillion range. But eventually, I do think it might not overtake these, but a rising tide in this instance being the monetary printing raises all ships, so all these values will rise inevitably because of that. And we'll get into that again in a different show. But like you're saying, T-Heat, all these are valued in the US dollar. Now, this is probably a US site, but that is the worldwide, atypical or typical rather form of currency to just price everything in, even in these foreign countries. As I grow older and you realize how big this world is, it does honestly shock me how one currency rules all in a sense. But
Well, look, Mega, while you're on this page, and I don't even think THEAT gave much pushback. I don't know what the crux of that was. One, yes, there are other stable coins based in other currencies, but just like how Bitcoin had the first movers advantage and continues to have a higher market cap for the foreseeable future, stable coins being based in the US dollar will be multiples more dominant, especially with the U.S. finally accepting it and pushing the current liquidity that they have into the stable coins. And so yes, the market caps will grow, but the U.S. wants to make sure that the U.S. based stable coins get kind of run that. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I kind of died out early too, and again, I was never disagreeing with your points or anything, but I just wanted to offer a little bit of an aside to it. But the other thing is, and I don't want to turn this political, and maybe this is also another show topic, but when we're talking about what the current administration's doing, and I think it's a good thing. I think that any government adoption, especially the U.S. government, is going to help overall. But there is questions, at least I have personally, about their motivation, specifically Trump. With he's obviously embraced cryptocurrency quite a bit in a lot of different ways, and he has a lot of his wealth tied into the value of cryptocurrency. So that is kind of its own thing, its own topic. Nevertheless, it also gives me like a little bit of concern because when he's out of office, I mean, he can't run again, right? In 4 years, it's done.
What does that mean in 4 years?
Right. So, and I mean, that's so far away. We don't have to talk about that, but it just is something to just kind of give you some pause. But I think the bigger reason that we're going to continue to see things in the cryptocurrency market grow is actually more the adoption of the ETFs, because you've seen a huge amount of inflow. It opens it up a lot easier to investors who maybe aren't as comfortable with blockchain technology, that kind of stuff, but they are more familiar with just investing through Fidelity or Schwab or whatever. Right. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of forces at play here. I don't know. It's tough to say, obviously, where things are going, but it definitely seems like just history, it repeats itself when it seems like we're going up, right?
Yeah. I mean, to respond to that, yes, this guy and his family, they're filling their pockets. I mean, come on, but even when the automobile was coming into effect and their internet was coming into effect, whoever was in power was going to make sure that their next of kin was going to benefit from it. At the end of the day, it's infrastructure. right? And if the US is putting down an infrastructure, yes, that is what's needed. And the ETFs are a part of that infrastructure. Whatever administration it is, however they fill their pockets, I could care less. I have a quote that I always use, and I talk to my wife about all the time. I'm gonna put my pennies next to their dollars. And that's what your
Thanks.
father that's
It's a
what your
great
father
quote.
had taught you
Yeah.
to do even from an early age, right? And so, yeah, I do think the ETFs play a part, but I believe the infrastructure goes above the ETFs because the ETF is one aspect, of the infrastructure. And Mega, before I pass it over to you, one of the thoughts that I was wanting to leave here was when you showed the hierarchy of gold and this and that and everything where it is. We'll get into later shows where we'll talk about, because I've been a proponent of where I believe Bitcoin price is going to go, and that'll come up shortly, but also to why I believe that the top of the market isn't here, but also to where that liquidity for where Bitcoin is going to come from. And when you look at Nvidia, Microsoft, when you look at the stock market, that's where that liquidity is going to come from. But also when you look at the future of Bitcoin, it's a 1 to 22 ratio to gold right now. And if Bitcoin has all the properties that gold has, but even better, then where does that ratio meet, and how long does it take for that ratio to catch up? Which is why, even as somebody who is not a mega Bitcoin person, I do think that there are multiples ahead when there's a technology advantage, but the deficit of a 22-to-1 ratio, even if it comes to meet it halfway, right, at 11 trillion, that's a 10x from where we are right now. So just want to leave that. I'm not a Bitcoin hater. I stack Satoshis as well. But we're going to get into the future, hard numbers and where the liquidity comes from to bring Bitcoin where it's projected to go.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I don't know. Of course, I have a baseline knowledge. I don't know the deep intricacies of gold, other than, a small portion is mined every year, similar to Bitcoin. However, like you said, some of the aspects of Bitcoin are better. Bitcoin is still being mined. It is not fully in circulation yet, but eventually it will stop. There is no more to be minted after like 2100, the year 2100, 2150 or something like that. So it gets really small too in the next 10 years. We have these halvings. So that mining rate, of course, is going to have every 4 years or so based on a block amount. So the amount that's left is not a lot. And you asked earlier, I just didn't want to mess up your groove. The stat, I believe, is there's about 60 million American millionaires. Maybe this stat is global. Regardless, there's not a ton in the world. So using this stat, there's 60 million millionaires. If all of them want to grab a Bitcoin at today's price, 100K, they could, right? They could afford it, but they can't all get a single Bitcoin. That is a wild stat to me, because one of the biggest things I think why, an argument of some older, whether it be retired, close to retiring, more wealthy people, more, how do you say, set would be a good word. They have no worries. They've retired. Their path is set. They got grandkids. They're chilling. But some people along those lines, one of their biggest arguments is, why doesn't everyone have one? It's the same reason he's asking me that question, complacency, because they don't have the need to make a return anymore on their money, theoretically. You know what I mean? They don't have a need to worry in that sense. Their avenues are set. Their machines are pushing, they're good till the finish line and probably then some. However, that's why that stat is even crazier, because we don't have long before, theoretically, the price of this stuff, you will not be able to obtain one single Bitcoin. For us today, not even getting on the money printing side of things, we all over time could buckle down at this price. If it was to stay constant at 118,000, we could all save enough to get to a Bitcoin. I fully believe it. However, for people starting today, if you don't have one already, that is, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not a full coiner. You guys don't have to say anything on that point. Regardless, if you started today and you're not already a very well off, probably millionaire type of figure, you're not going to drop, especially learning of the intricacies of Bitcoin today. You're probably not going to drop 100,000 even then. You're still going to stack from the small side up, maybe 10 racks in there, depending on what your capabilities are. But that stat blows my mind every time I hear it, because most of those millionaires in this 60 million number, like I said, have their avenues set. They're not going to trickle much more than currently what financials say of 1% to 4% of their allocation at max of their net worth. You know what I mean? Which isn't a ton.
Yeah.
Now you're hearing, and I'll finish this thought. Now you're hearing financial advisors push towards 10 to 20 to 40% in high risk situations of their net worth into this asset. So it's coming fast, boys.
Yeah, right now definitely not 40%. I think
that's high risk for sure. But the 10% number is getting out there in common financial advisors.
I'd be hard pressed if I was hearing people say 10. I think 1 to 5% is the general. It's like the general advisement, and you even have some financial agencies that are still not ready to even pitch it. Right. I, a particular one, which I will not name, in the New York area, tried to hire me, and I asked them, do you guys offer, crypto in your portfolios? They said no. I said, I have nothing to say to you. So there are some who are even now getting around to doing that. But for me, the reason why I'm more interested in accumulating some Bitcoin is because I do think, and we'll talk about this more, I do think Bitcoin is completing a mega cycle. And I do think that, we're due to see a $30,000, $40,000 Bitcoin, if not a $25,000 Bitcoin.
As in a drop.
Yes, as we enter the bear market. And so
for
I've
me,
come
as a
around.
sidebar, as an orange pilled maxi, I would love that.
Allow
me a backdated a trip to the past.
Exactly.
Yes.
So being, having charts on my side, I'm finding like, you know what? Let me collect, because you cannot outstate that. Even though it did have a first mover's advantage, it is the number one proof of concept for this ecosystem. And so if I spend the next 2.5 years trying to be a full coiner, that's plenty of time to take care of my bills and things of that nature. So the complacency and the incompetency, I definitely agree with you on that when it comes to not knowing enough. And there's a generational gap. It's just simply a generational gap. The stock market has been here 200 plus years. Those who are, I'd say, above millennials, may not understand, but they also don't have as much years in their life to deal with risk assets. And so you're looking at the millennials, the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs. They're the ones that are going to come into the job field. They're going to make their money, and they're going to be a part of the next few bull runs. That's going to do what? Put money in our pockets, right? Because we're doing the accumulation, as of now. So I don't have the FOMO to buy Bitcoin now at all. But I will once the prices get lower. But I do have, if you want to show my shared screen, a guesstimation of where I see Bitcoin going. And in between this, this is our next topic, right? So we're touching a bit on everything in the future. We're gonna delve more into some of these topics here. But I have a guesstimation of where I see Bitcoin going. And if you follow some of the discords that we're part of, I do like short-term predictions, and my short terms are not always so accurate, but my macro predictions, not to gas myself, have been pretty on point. And so this is from like March. I believe this is from March, and Bitcoin had dropped down to like the 70s, or something of that nature, the 80s. And we were still looking at some upside coming from this ecosystem. And for me, I believe $142,000 to $216,000 is what we have in store. So to go from the 83,000 or so to now the 118, 120,000. We are closer to that 143 guesstimate now than we were prior. For me, I believe, and the topic that we're going to say is, what do we expect Bitcoin at in 2025, end of year? Where do we expect Bitcoin at in 2027? Where do we expect Bitcoin at in 2030? Where do we expect Bitcoin at in 2045? Right. So when I saw you place that on the topics, I said, oh, perfect. I already have a tweet from March that I can bring up to kind of touch base on this. So I believe in this bull cycle, which I believe ends this year for Bitcoin. Okay. Now for the altcoins, a little bit of a different story, right? Usually you see Bitcoin top out. Bitcoin after the halving, you normally get about 12 to 16 months after post halving, where Bitcoin continues to rise. You have Bitcoin cool off, and then you start having altcoins start to make their move. We haven't gotten a chance to talk about the Fed rate cuts that we're projecting, but I believe by the time the Fed does its second to third cut is when alt season really just goes ballistic. Alt season lasts about 3 to 6 weeks, and then boom, bear market. So, we'll talk more about that in the shows to come. But I believe for this bull market, because we've had such a longer correctional period, I believe that 160 to 170 is a nice place where if you're someone like me who's been accumulating for a long time and you're looking to possibly take profit, I'm not waiting for 216,000. I'm taking profit way earlier than that. If you're somebody like THEAT who just never sells, you don't have nothing to worry about. You're just gonna sit. You're gonna watch what's going on. You're gonna be like, okay, cool. Like I have somebody in my camp that's giving me these nice predictions. I don't have to do anything. I'm gonna wait for the next time Bitcoin gets to about 40,000 and start my accumulation. Even if it goes to 25,000, even better, right? But someone like me that utilize charts likes to take some sort of profit. So I see this 143 to 216 happening this year, if not really early into next year. Bear market lasting in 2026, the worst part of the bear market in 2026. And then 2028 to 2030, we could be seeing a $350 to $800,000 Bitcoin. And that's going to be when the next bull market kind of hits its peak between 2028 and 2030. We go into another bear market, and I know you had 2045 there, but yeah, by 2045, we're definitely in the million when it comes to Bitcoin. But these are my projections. I like to timestamp things. There's a lot of different reasons why I have some of these predictions here. We follow some of the charting that I've had here for a very, very long time. And we'll talk more about this as we go forward. But this upside that we predicted here for Bitcoin continues to remain in this channel. And when you look at the top of this channel, it's at $166,000. And so that's where for me it is very risky, and I'll be just sitting back waiting to kind of see what happens. And if we get the kind of bear market that I'm looking at, yeah, we could be back testing the start of the previous bull market here around that $15,000, $16,000, $13,000 area. And for those who are accumulators, you won't be too upset about that. But we can get into conversations about some of the other reasons why I believe these are the price targets, including why the downside could be so severe. And I know the interest rates in the bond market are a part of that. But, for guys like you guys who are accumulating, you don't really, I know THEAT doesn't care about taking profit. Mega, I don't know if you care about taking some sort of profit. You might not care. But, what are you guys thinking of your projections as we go forward into this market? And what are your thoughts on bull and bear market?
So for me, I have it depends. 'Cause I don't want to say I don't take profit, but the way that I take profit is maybe different than most. Because for me, like short term, I'm just holding it, and I think maybe 10, 15 years when I'm looking to sell. But I know that there are opportunities short term to make money, and I do that actually through That's another reason I like the ETFs. I sell options against it to take some profit off of there, and we can get into that more at a later time. But ultimately, it's to me still a huge accumulation phase, regardless of the price. But I do like to watch the charts and know, okay, right now I'm really not buying, but if it dips down, I'm going to start accumulating a little bit more. Like maybe now I'm selling some calls on it, and then once it dips back down, I'm going to take that profit from the calls and I'm going to cycle it into buying a bigger position. So, but I would say, like, I do of my holdings, I'm doing like a small percentage of that. For the most part, I'm still in accumulation. So to your point, I don't care what the price does, because in 20 years, that's where my exit is looking. So, but the numbers are wild, and I'm been enjoying, like, I got in to the ETFs early. That was really whenever I built my biggest Bitcoin position, because I saw the institutional, investors coming on board and said, okay, let's get into this. I actually got in before they converted to the spot ETFs. You used to be able to get into future ETFs.
Ooh.
And once they announced they were going to approve the spot ETFs, that's whenever Bitcoin made a nice solid jump. I think it was trading around like 25,000, maybe a little bit lower. And then it kind of started going on a nice little run. So I've already seen a really nice gain. So that's where I'm on that position, selling call options against it now, because I'm seeing, a spot where I'm like, okay, if I sell part of my position at this point, I'm making a good portion of profits on what I just sold, and I know I know it's going to be a wavy ride. So I know I can get back in at a later date at most likely a more favorable price. So I do like to time it a little bit, but ultimately I don't want to do that with a huge portion of my holdings, because I think it's going up. So why risk it for what they call picking up pennies in front of a freight train, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So for me, a little bit of a few avenues for me, because I have kind of like you said, T, there's so many ways to hold the coin itself, especially Bitcoin, that I have different avenues for different purposes. So for me, as far as I don't know what to expect, because this is my first cycle. So it's great insight from you, Trade, to hear, maybe after you feel like Bitcoin tops, we have 12 to 16 months of altcoins, potentially, of a bull cycle. If we're not in a super cycle, that is. So that's kind of what worries me about taking profit. However, for me, I plan to take a little off the table at 150 if we see it. The hardest part for me comes to be when to re-enter, because I'm no fortune teller. That's what scares me the most, and that's what kind of encouraged me, like I said, to have these separate wallets where I'm not touching. If I'm buying on an exchange, I reach a certain dollar amount and I take it off exchange and I go to cold storage. So that's kind of my main hodl strategy, if you will. However, as I mentioned earlier, alts is where I'm doing one of two things. Alts is where I'm truly taking profit. If I was to take profit on Bitcoin, it would go to probably stable coins temporarily until I feel ready to jump back in on a low value Bitcoin, maybe trickle in at, low values. I'd love to see anything under 100K. I'm worried also that we may never see under 100K, but I love the insight from you, Trade, because that's where my bullish mind goes. What if we never see 100K? And I'm hitting that FOMO hard, you know what I mean? So, I made a tweet a little bit back as well, where around 100,000, I sold all my precious metals. Nothing crazy, I'm a young guy overall, but I had a good bit of precious metals that I was just slowly stacking up over time, because that's what the old heads told you to do. That's where the money's at. That's where the good, smart money's at. So I actually liquidated in I'd say that was probably a month or two ago now at this point, all of my gold and silver into Bitcoin. And, it's only a 20% gain, but it's been pretty solid. But for me, that FOMO kicks me in the back of the head every time. I'm like, oh, you're going to want to take profits here soon, just in case. You have that good devil, or excuse me, that bad devil and that good angel on one shoulder. And how do you guys cope with that type of feeling? We are coming up on the hour, and I want to keep these to an hour, but Trade, start with you, bro. How do you cope with the FOMO of what if we are in a super cycle versus I need to take profits and be smart with my money?
Yeah, I think one of the great things when you're going through cycles, and Bitcoin is the general thought of the 4-year cycle, and as the space matures, I think there'll be less and less significance in a 4-year cycle. But I kept a journal. You keep a
Mm.
journal of the different times and the periods in which you go through, and sometimes you look back at a certain time and you're like, yo, I was tripping.
I was off, yeah.
I was tripping during this time period. But yeah, that's one way. The two is just nothing beats experience. So you just kind of gonna have to live through, some of these periods. But for me, the charting aspect has always been a big guidance to kind of help control the FOMO, control the because I've been a big crypto proponent, big crypto guy for a while. And when you see prices going up, you think, oh, there's no way it goes below this. And then you're sitting there for 2 years like, oh, this will never come back above this. So I try to go against the herd, and in the macro sense, the long term, it does work for me. On a micro sense, things change, things are volatile. You might not get, exactly what you're looking for. But I just continue to educate myself. I continue to understand that this is a new asset class. And I continue to expect the worst, but prepare for the best.
Okay.
And so when you do that, there's really nothing that you won't be ready for. And yeah, because I've had this experience, after each cycle, I do look to take some profit. And even if I'm going back into USDC and getting 5% APY while I wait to see kind of how things fare out. I have the same thing like THEAT. I have a 15 year, I've had a 15-year plan since 9 years ago, since 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So there's still that 20 to 25 to the 30-year plan. And as long as you have that long-term mindset, then you're perfectly fine to
I like that.
deal with the ups and downs. I mean, I went through Sam Bankman-Fried, right? I went through Mount Gox and the hack there, and all those different times. It was like, oh, this thing will never come back. But
Yeah.
when you do your research, when you see what's going on, and we have a long-term plan, it becomes easier to to partake. And then once you're in it and you have a flow of things, you can start to kind of customize and make your own moves. So long term is always the way to go. But yeah, that's kind of how I approach it.
Well, it
Yeah.
does feel like the herd is super extreme, like you're kinda mentioning, whether it be we will never go back up or we're never going to fall below X price. The herd overall has very extreme emotions, but, same question to you, T. How do
Yeah.
you kinda debate that?
Yeah, no, I want to piggyback off that because I like a lot of what you said there, Trade. And for me, anytime I'm deciding to invest my money, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of different options out there for what you do with your money. Maybe you just sit on it. Maybe you put it into the stock market, crypto, whatever it may be. And so I always got to make the choice on how I'm allocating my different funds because I want to have a mixture. I want to have a mixture of exposure. But I also want to have a solid thesis before I enter into any investment. I want to have an idea of what that business or what that product is, what that cryptocurrency is, and why I think that the price of that asset is going to go up. And so always do your own research and try to find good sources, try to find good information, and spend time actually investing. And then once you feel comfortable making that investment at whatever stage that is, have conviction in that, man. I know a lot of people, the first time that investment becomes shaky, and this is true regardless of if it's Bitcoin or any other investment, once it gets shaky, they might bail out and they're down 5%, 10%, something like that. When if they would have just held for maybe 6 more months, a year, they could have seen 20, 30% gain, but they just didn't have that conviction that they should have had. So you always have to be re-examining those, investment thesis, though. I'm not saying that you shouldn't exit an investment if something changes. Obviously you got to make those decisions, but you can't be spooked by the market, because markets are going to be cyclical. They're going to be bear markets. They're going to be bull markets. But history has shown us at least for most financial markets, that they tend to be over the longer scale periods. Things go up. It tend to be a bull market overall. So have that conviction, make sure that you're making strong investments, and then managing that as you get more familiar, kind of to your point, Mega. At first it's easiest just to buy and hold, and maybe you sell at if you made a large percent gain, you held for a couple of years and you sell. But once you get more familiar, you realize there are other avenues, things that I kind of mentioned there, where maybe you're selling options against, your position, or maybe you're selling a portion, cycling into alt, and cycling back out of alts and back into Bitcoin, that kind of stuff. You can get more advanced with it. But first you have to have that comfort, and it probably takes years to get to that point. I'd say, you don't want to rush into being a trader. You want to be an investor first and foremost. And then once you feel that comfort of knowing, like, okay, now's my time to take some profits, you could become more of like a swing style trader where, over the course of a couple of months, you're trading at some highs and buying back in at some lower prices, and making a little bit of profit for yourself along the way. Right.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And we're going to need, I do think, based on a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies, and now you have Ethereum treasury, Solana treasury, hyper liquid treasury companies going to kind of coincide with the stock market. I think we're going to need a more focused stock market episode of this year, Orange Energy, focused on, first off, options, how to do them, because a lot of people, that is definitely a more advanced tactic. And of course, you need the liquidity to do so, and the risk tolerance to do so, the wherewithal to be able to, tolerate that risk as well.
Yeah, I think these
are very cool.
I think these are going to be great in the bear market, right? Because with a lot of these different things, doing it in a bull market, unless you're experienced, it's gonna suck. Okay?
Is that because the volatility, do you think? Or
it's easy to get just ran over, bro.
Yeah, it's easy to get ran over, and there are short-term strategies when it comes to these things, and there are long-term strategies when it comes to these things. The easiest plays for me is to be in a bear market and to do long option strategies, long ETF strategies. And so you don't set up in a bull market. You set up in a bear market in preparation for a bull market. So, the same way that THEAT got into these ETFs early on when things were shaky, and now he's benefiting greatly, is the same way that we should be thinking about it. So we're going to have a crap ton of content in the bear market, because when you look at even something like DeFi, right, you have crypto, and then it gets even more in depth. The most basic level of DeFi is interest on USDC, interest on getting free, having Algorand and getting free tokens, because there's a 5% APY on them, and you do not do that in a bull market. You do it in a bear market in preparation for a bull market. And so these ETFs that we see here that have a $45 million volume for IBIT, a $2-3 million volume, for FBTC, for Fidelity. These volumes are going to drop drastically, okay, in a bear market. And that's when you get in, and that's when you execute your dollar cost averaging strategy. And when you look at, like, let's say with the stocks and the Bitcoin miners, like a Riot, like a Mara, getting a 2-3 year option on them in the bear market as you prepare for the bull market. Those type of contracts go from 30 cents to $2,000, right? But you don't get in a bull market. You have to have the testicle fortitude to get in the bear market, and that's some of the things that we're going to provide in this show, is to be here to deliver the facts, to deliver the strategies when you're in a bear market, when you feel like things are just down and there's nowhere to go. Folks like us that have had some experience just sharing our opinions will continue to stay the way and stay the strategy. And I'm very excited to be doing that moving forward while we touch on the fundamentals and the technicals.
For sure. And again, bear market will leave a lot of opportunity for more background of these assets that we may want to give. For example, the intricacies of Bitcoin, the intricacies of XRP when we're able to do a full 60-minute deep dive with you, Trade, on some of your extra knowledge on the coins itself. So, but very successful first episode here. I appreciate everyone who did come out and watch. Definitely follow Trade on X, Twitter. You can subscribe to him on YouTube as well. This show did stream to both his channel and mine. We'll have some clips coming out there on our channels as well. At the Trade Room, room spelled with 2 zeros. You can follow THEAT as well on Twitter at THEATJGG. And I'm at Megalodon IV, but we'll be coming back at you guys with a bunch more in terms of more specific topics along with the orange pill, more specific topics along with the broader markets. And at this point, like we said, I don't know how much longer we got. I'm just buying because we have these time horizons that are much longer, but take some profits, boys and girls, because it doesn't feel right when you go and when you round trip your bags and you're sitting in a bear market and you're just stacking. So take a little off the table. It feels great. Do something fun with the family, treat yourself, and let's keep pushing forward and make this bread as we go along these years in this digital asset world we have here. So for Trade Room, for THEAT, my name's Mega. This is Orange Energy. We'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.